Okay, so in this video, we're going to run image trace on an image to create a pattern that we can use as a text effect. Now, image trace basically turns a raster image into a vector-based artwork. Now, we have a lot of control and settings to choose from when running image trace. So let's take a look at those options now. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer for us to work on, because we're going to be creating some text that is going to be in the background. And so what I'd like to do is create a new layer that we can work on. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. You can hold down Alt or Option as you do this to name it right away. And I'm going to call this text background. I'll go ahead and click OK. And if you like, you can lock the guitar layer. That way you'll never accidentally put anything on that layer until you unlock it. So that looks pretty good. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place an image in this file. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the File menu and choose Place. And in your Exercise Files folder, you're going to notice that I included a couple of images for you to start with, but honestly, feel free to use your own images. I'm a huge fan of texture, and so a lot of times I'll just take pictures of interesting texture patterns and utilize them in my artwork. So I'm going to start with this bark image, and I'm going to go ahead and choose Place. It's okay if we link it, because we're really only using this temporarily. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Place, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag to kind of fill, this top area, up here at the top. And we can change this later on. It's no big deal. Now, when you place an image, as soon as you have a placed image, it could be embedded as well. But when the image is selected, you're going to notice up here at the top, you have a number of different choices to choose from. And one of which is embed, because we only linked it. So if we wanted to, we could embed it. But right here, we have image trace. And what I'm going to do is click that button. Now, when you do that, it's going to run image trace, and it's going to give you a default option to choose from right now. And if you look here, we're currently viewing the tracing result, and we're using the preset called default. Now, if you click on the preset drop-down menu, you can choose from a number of different options. So for example, if I choose high fidelity photo, it's going to try to render that image accurately using vector-based elements. And there may be times when you want to do this. Now you can see that this is a fairly intensive process, but notice right now that using the high fidelity preset, if I zoom in on this, you're going to notice that it's actually made up of vector-based elements. So depending on what you're trying to do, you may want to do something like this, but for our purposes, I'm trying to use this as a really kind of general pattern. And so in the preset drop-down menu, I'm going to go ahead and go back to, let's go ahead and go back to default. And it's important to understand that each time you choose a preset, it reruns the process on that image. Now, if you want more control, you can click on this button here, and this will open up the image trace panel where you can control more about how this is generated. Now, what you want to keep in mind is that each time you adjust one of these, if preview is on, it's going to rerun that process. So what I often do is I'll uncheck preview, and then you can adjust some of these settings, and then you can turn the preview back on to rerun the operation. And one of the things that I'm going to do is turn on ignore white, because I want it to ignore the white areas of the image. So I'll turn on my preview. It's going to rerun the operation. And that's looking pretty good, I think. So I can close the image trace panel. Now, right now, this is an image trace object, which is a unique type of object. You can see there's like an X in the middle of it. And that's because this is the result of the tracing operation. Now, if you want it to be just vector-based elements that you can manipulate, we can come up here and click the Expand button. And as soon as you do that, you're going to notice that this image is now made up of paths. So this is just a standard everyday object. Now, what I'm going to do in this case, I'm going to rotate this object. And I'll kind of move this over here. And then I'm going to add some text to my document. I'm just going to type jazz up here. And feel free to resize this. I think I want this text to fit like within that area. And feel free to add a little kerning if you want this text to fit together a little bit better. And when you're happy with it, we're going to select it with the selection tool and go to the type menu and choose Create Outlines. Now what this is going to do, if you look in the Layers panel, you'll see that this group is made up of 4 individual compound paths. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to choose Ungroup, and then I'm going to go to Object, Compound Path, Release, and then I'll choose Object, Compound Path, Make. Now what that did for me is that this is now one single compound path. And you want to make sure that this compound path is on top of this artwork. Now if you'd like, you can go ahead and change the color of this. If you want to go with a different color, maybe I'll go with this purple, something like that. And I can even lighten it if I want to. You can tweak this any way you wish. Maybe I'll go with more of a blue color, maybe something like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this so that it's underneath the jazz. And you can reposition this where you want it to be. And then I'm going to select the jazz compound path and then this pattern. And I'm going to go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make. And what that does for me is it basically now is clipping that pattern and creating a pretty cool like grunge effect. And remember, when you use an object as a clipping mask, it loses its fill color. But you can always, if you double click right on the path edge here, you can actually select that path. Let's try that again. Double click right on the edge of the path. There we go. And now if you go to your swatches panel, you could actually fill that with a different color. And if we double click, we'll get out of isolation mode, and now you can see the effect that we've created. So we're basically utilizing any old image with a texture, and we're using that to kind of create like more of a grunge look on our text. And you can also, if you wanted to, you can remove the fill from that object, and that gives it a little bit more of a, kind of, distressed look, inside of your artwork. So you can see any image can be vectorized, if you will, and used as artwork in a variety of different ways inside of Illustrator. Now I encourage you to use some of your own images, but you can also use the other images that I supplied to you. You can use the grass image and the wood image as well. And your homework, if you will, is to fill up the background of this poster with other text elements to give this poster more background elements. You can look at the next video if you want to see what I ended up coming up with.